deserve to live in the light.
I have a great past, so I'm totally fine.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full breakdown and Easter eggs for the entire Thunderbolts movie. There's so much going on. Obviously, it's meant to be a big lead up for the Fantastic Four movie, the new Avengers teams in Avengers Doomsday, and just Avengers Doomsday in general, just because this is one of the last movies that they had to start setting that up next year. Like, it's literally a year from Avengers Doomsday coming out. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. I know there's going to be a bunch of questions after the movie comes out about what they're going to do with Sentry going forward because he's so powerful, the Void character. Does he have a future in Marvel Phase 7 after Secret Wars, or are they just going to push the character off to the side the way they do with like the really OP characters? Just because when characters start to get that powerful, they tend to break the stories they're in because they could solo almost any problem that you throw at them. The way the movie currently handles that is by explaining that Robert Reynolds has schizophrenia like he does in the comics, so basically the Void becomes this completely separate personality created when he took the Golden Sentry serum. It'd be kind of like having alternate personalities if that alternate personality also had different powers. It's a little bit like the way the Legion character works. If you remember the Legion TV series on FX, that was actually a pretty solid series. Sentry's different powers work a little bit like that, like the Void is meant to have completely separate power sets than he does. The way the movie explains Sentry's creation is that Val used her OXC group to fund the Golden Sentry serum, or the development of that, which is an offshoot of the Weapons Plus program and the Super Soldier serum that created Captain America back in the day. This is a real big comic book Easter egg, but she has no connection with the Weapons Plus program. She was using her OXC group, which they use as sort of real-world parallel for, say, like the Blackwater group, military contractor, paramilitary organization with their hands in lots of pies all over the world. It's the whole reason why she's able to buy the Avengers Tower from Tony Stark, which would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. She originally was the CEO and owner of that group, so there's this big joke about it during her impeachment trial where she's like, I've completely divested myself of this company, when really she's still very much involved with it and running the company itself. While she's also been running the CIA inside the MCU this whole time. She claims she started the Sentry program to replace the Avengers because in present day, there is no actual Avengers team that's active in the MCU. The way they explain this is that yes, there are some surviving Avengers like the Hulk, Thor, from the events of Avengers Endgame, the original Avengers movie, who are still active around the MCU in different places. But at least according to Kevin Feige's explanation, there is no active team, like they disbanded after Avengers Endgame and all kind of went their separate ways, and they're waiting for a reason to come back together. That reason will arrive during Avengers Doomsday in the form of, say, like the Fantastic Four coming from their universe, and also Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom showing up in the MCU ready to destroy it. All the crisis that Yelena talks about happening in space, like there's this big space crisis right now, those are the incursions, another big reason that the Avengers will have to come back together. Also, they're sort of playing into the idea, the joke of the post-credit scene with the new Avengers trampling on the copyright that Sam Wilson is filing for right now, like he's filing for the trademark to the Avengers name so that he can put his own new Avengers team together, but that's just kind of the gag for the post-credit scene. By the time we get to Avengers Doomsday, some of those characters will probably get killed off, some of them will merge to a single Avengers team, so it'll be very different by the end of Doomsday when we spill into Secret Wars, and most of the characters are probably going to die anyway. If you're worried about them having too many Avengers to deal with, don't worry, they will not have to deal with that many by Secret Wars, for reasons. If you haven't read that comic book arc, I would recommend checking it out. They don't really get too deep into Sentry's many different powers, like he has crazy numbers of different types of powers. He's so OP in the comics, it just depends on which writer is actually working on the character, how powerful he gets. In the comics, they showed that the Hulk, when he's World Breaker Hulk status, like when he's that level of power, he's able to go toe-to-toe with Sentry, and it's implied that he could potentially beat him. But if you're making MCU comparisons, he would be able to stomp Thor right now. Like in the movie, it's a big plot point where he says, why would a god listen to anyone? And you said that I'm powerful than all the Avengers, and there's a god on the team, so doesn't that make me a god by default? I am sure there'll be all kinds of questions about power scaling, who is the most powerful in Avengers Doomsday. We will get to that when we start getting some more trailers for that later this year. But at least during the movie, Val has a line where she says, "You can do anything." That's sort of the reference to his many, many different comic book powers, because he almost can do pretty much anything. Like almost any power you could think of, he potentially has. Generally, the movie is meant to pick up a short time jump after the end of Captain America Brave New World, after Bucky has won his election. Remember, there was a cameo during Captain America Brave New World when he was on the election trail. He's the congressman from Brooklyn, where he and Steve Rogers were from originally during World War II era, before everything went crazy for them. He moved back there by the events of Falcon and Winter Soldier and has since moved to Washington, D.C. since he's been in office. The way that Val makes fun of him later in the movie, she says that he didn't even make it half a term. That would be about a year, or like a little bit under a year. So we'll say the movie picks up about a year after Captain America Brave New World, because also there are a couple references that Val makes, making funny jokes about Thunderbolt Ross turning into Red Hulk during that movie. The actual movie itself, like the main plot, takes place over just a couple days. It all happens very quickly, and then the post-credit scene is a 14-month time jump after the end of the movie when Val names them the government's new official Avengers. Avengers with a Z. But they start the movie bringing back the regular Marvel Studios title intro that you see before most of the Marvel movies. They tried to take it away for Captain America Brave New World. People were generally not a fan of that. So they brought it back, but it's a slightly different version of the title. So it's a dark title, like it's not the traditional red and white version of the Marvel Studios logo or even the gold. It's very, very dark to foreshadow the Dark Avengers, which this team is a little bit more like, even though Val calls them the New Avengers. One of the other ways they foreshadow this big turn with them changing the name, the asterisk for Thunderbolt's temporary title to the Dark Avengers, the New Avengers, is by playing a version, like a darker version of the Avengers theme music. So already literally in like the first couple seconds of the movie starting, you kind of know where they're headed. The way they explain the asterisk in the title is that yes, it did always mean a temporary title name. The way they actually explain them picking the name the Thunderbolts, though, is vastly different from the comics. So in the comics, Baron Zemo puts the team together and they pretend to be heroes for a little while, but really it's more like a villain team. In the movie, the way they explain it in the MCU is that the Thunderbolts were the name of Yelena's childhood soccer team, which they keep telling jokes about because like one of the little girls crapped in the middle of the field, she wanted to be the goalie, they never won a game, they were terrible. So it's meant to be a metaphor for their really crappy team of Avengers coming together trying to save everyone. The actual opening scene of the movie is actually Yelena jumping off the world's second tallest building. They actually did this stunt in real life, and the way that Florence Pugh said it, she had to actually bug Kevin Feige over and over to let her actually do the stunt. Now, there was a stunt person that helped doing it, but they did this big behind-the-scenes featurette for it. It was a really, really big deal.
I've been excited about that since I read the first page of the script. Ta-da!
During the opening scene, as she jumps off the building in the middle of one of her missions, she talks about this void inside her, like a metaphorical void, to foreshadow the literal void character later in the movie, in the void space that they travel into. All this grief, this loss, this sense of purpose that she's been feeling since Natasha, Black Widow's death, her sister, during Avengers Endgame. She and all the other characters have basically been crashing out in their lives in different parts around the world, which is why I call the movie the Mental Health Avengers. But the actual mission that she's in the middle of here is going around the world destroying different labs for Project Sentry that Val wants to get rid of. Val is basically trying to get rid of all the evidence tying her to Project Sentry because that's the thing that's getting her impeached right now in Congress. Based on the way they explain it, the actual project to create the Sentry was something that everybody knew about, like Congress knew about it. It wasn't a big secret. They knew that she was trying to create her own superhero. The reason why she's getting impeached, though, is because people find out about all the shady stuff she's doing, all the human trials, all the people that have been dying while she's been testing the serum on them, because so far, nobody has survived the actual serum itself, the Golden Sentry serum, which is also accurate to the comics. There's a couple funny moments. She saves the guinea pig in the lab, winds up blowing it up, and then winds up going on to the next mission, so on and so forth. But they jump between a couple different storylines to show you what all the characters have been doing in present day. They go to Val's impeachment hearing. Her assistant is Mel, short for Melissa Gold, aka Songbird, what everybody thought going into the movie. She has a pendant with a bird on it. That's about as close as they get to actual Songbird Easter eggs from the comics. As far as we know, she doesn't have any power. She's just like a regular person. The way that she explains it is that she actually was in high school and was saved by the Avengers in the New York City area during the events of the first Avengers movie, so she's a bit of an Avengers fangirl, which is why she likes Bucky so much, but she does clown on him just a little bit. Like, she's not as despicable as Val, she seems like more of a realist though. She winds up trying to help Bucky give him evidence to stop Val from continuing with Project Sentry because she thinks that Val has gone off the rails, so at least she's trying to do a good thing. But like later in the movie, once they think they've stopped the Sentry, she asks Val for a raise, like, you need to give me a raise. If you didn't think so before, in this movie, Val is meant to be a parody of a lot of real-world political figures, so she probably looks familiar, sounds familiar, like the things that she says, the lies that she spins, are meant to feel like real-world things. She tries to talk her way out of the situation and make it seem like she's been doing everything she can to actually make things better in the United States. Like, she basically tried to spin things so that she looks much, much better than everyone else she's involved with. She makes fun of Thunderbolt Ross for being the president and then turning into Red Hulk. That happened a while ago, like I said. She references the Avengers no longer coming through the door to save them, and that's why they needed the Project Sentry. She also makes it sound like part of the reason for wanting to get the jump on this Sentry character, like the very powerful character, is because there are other, much more powerful technological nations, which is a reference to Wakanda, for instance. Like, she's trying to spin it to Congress, we need to be worried about Wakanda, when really that's not the case. Val then continues to try and clean up all of her messes, connecting her to Project Sentry, all the secret labs all over the world, and then eventually tries to send all the Thunderbolts characters separately to her underground base, OXE base in Utah, which is also from the comics, where she's keeping the rest of her evidence that she's basically going to torch, including the Thunderbolts characters. The way they explain all of them in the movie is that up to this point, none of them know that each other have been working for Val. It's all been very compartmentalized, so Val sends them on a mission to essentially kill each other.
I'm Bob.
Who sent you, Bob?
Robert Reynolds was also one of the last people that was part of the Project Sentry program. She thought that he died, and his body was just in a case inside that room that she was going to burn too, which is why he was in there. He winds up secretly surviving, but the way they explain his powers, his multiple personalities, the Void personality, is that he has blackouts where he'll lose his memory after he has delusions of grandeur and then swing back and forth, kind of like he's bipolar almost. So when all the different Thunderbolts characters see each other in that underground base and start trying to kill each other on their missions, like, get out of my way, I need to kill that person over there, the other person's trying to kill the other person, and so on and so forth, Robert Reynolds, aka Bob, they just call him Bob for most of the events of the movie, just wakes up because his case gets activated and opens. Like, oh, how'd you get here? I don't remember, because he had the memory loss, which also happens at the end of the movie too. He forgets the entire events of the movie after he winds up defeating the Void himself. They use this opening scene to basically kill off the Taskmaster character. So if you didn't like the way Marvel changed Taskmaster, it's no longer an issue. Now they can have Tony Master's character in the MCU become a new version of Taskmaster and be a little more comic book accurate. They basically said the reason why they killed her off so quickly is because they wanted to have a big death early in the movie to make you feel like there were some stakes, like people could die, so it just wound up being Taskmaster that pulled the short straw. While they're busy trying to actually escape the underground base because it goes into lockdown mode, Val is having a benefit dinner with a whole bunch of Avengers artifacts, like she has the A from the original Avengers tower back during the first Avengers movie. She has Loki's scepter that held the Mind Stone briefly. She has Chitauri cuffs from that first Avengers invasion that Bucky later steals and uses on some of the Thunderbolts characters. The way they explain her big party is that she's throwing it to try and turn favor in Congress to her, like she's basically trying to do PR for herself. Bucky winds up getting Songbird's help, who turns on Val after she visibly tries to kill all the Thunderbolts characters, like there's a pad they're watching where she basically starts pressing buttons, trying to get the base to basically burn them alive. That's why Bucky knows where to go, where he helps them on the convoy and then captures them. But initially, the whole reason why he went there wasn't to actually rescue them. It was actually to haul them in so they could testify against Val inside Congress as part of her impeachment. He and everyone else in Congress is trying to get Val thrown in prison for everything she's done. Val spends the entire movie trying to weasel out of that, successfully by the end of the movie. It's not really till Sentry tries to sacrifice himself to let the others get away in a selfless kind of way that he starts to remember that he has powers again, because all the OXC troops that Val sends in try to gun him down unsuccessfully because he is effectively bulletproof. He starts to realize that he has powers again, but then winds up passing out again, and Val takes him back to the new Avengers Tower, which she's calling the Watchtower because she bought it with OXC money, and she was just going to use it for Project Sentry. And the Sentry was meant to be the only superhero, like replace the Avengers, so originally it was just going to be called the Watchtower, but I think the idea at the end of the movie is that when she names the Thunderbolts the new Avengers, they just start calling it the new Avengers Tower. Watchtower in the comics is the name of his base. It sits on top of the Avengers Tower, so it's just them doing more comic book Easter eggs. Most of the rest of the storyline with the Sentry is her just trying to convince him to do what she wants him to do. Like, she wants to be able to control him. The way she explains it is she says that she should be in control of Earth's last line of defense. She calls him Earth's mightiest hero, and that is another big Avengers reference. That's one of their catchphrases in the comics. One of the ways they visualize the Void's powers is that it sends people into like their deepest, darkest memories. We get a brief flashback for Val that kind of explains her, like, it doesn't completely wave its hand over like all the terrible stuff she does, but it does give a little bit of background to her character and why she does some of the things that she does. Like, this is why you're this way.
And instead, you make nice and you form a team.
She grew up in fear in another country, watching her father killed by somebody that he knew in some terrible way, so you just get the idea that she wanted more and more power, like the person with the biggest stick would be the most protected, and that's why she pursues all this power. The way that she explains it to Mel, to Songbird later in the movie, is that there are bad guys and worse guys, so like she views herself as being one of the less bad people. The way they explain his classic comic book Sentry look like the yellow suit from the comics as well as his yellow hair because he's a brunette naturally is that they dye it to look blonde because that'll be more appealing in a marketing kind of sense. Like it's a bunch of Val's marketing people trying to run him as a superhero business the way you would expect somebody terrible like Val to do something like this. So if you think the suit looks a little bit cringy, it's meant to be that way on purpose, like a little tongue-in-cheek, like, yeah, this is something that a marketing team would come up with, not something that an actual person would want to wear running around. It's a little bit like the way Vought treats all of its Compound B superheroes on The Boys, like it's all just this big marketing experiment to try and earn more money. We don't really see Sentry again, though, that much until they all come to the new Avengers Tower to try and confront Val and arrest her. But after they managed to escape the underground base in Utah, Red Guardian heard Val because he was their limo driver, so he knew where to go to actually rescue them and is able to pick them up in his red limo. Red Guardian protecting you from a boring evening. As you would expect, all the marketing has been doing, they mostly use him for comedic relief, but he actually genuinely has some really great heartfelt moments with Yelena, like they are the emotional core of this movie. Earlier in the movie, she'd gone to visit him. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. It sounds like since the events of Avengers Endgame, or maybe like a little bit after Endgame. And they just talk about Natasha a little bit, like her dying, how she had purpose. Red Guardian has this grand idea of what it is to be a superhero. He misses the way that people in Russia used to love him when he was in his core Red Guardian days. He tries to inspire Yelena to be more like Natasha, like your sister had the right idea joining the Avengers. So like the entire movie, all he wants to do is just be on a superhero team. So like he is so jazzed up when he actually shows up in Utah to rescue them. Bucky winds up saving them from Val's convoy and then tries to take them in, but then Songbird basically tells him about Project Sentry and how Val's gone completely off the rails and he has to literally bring everybody he knows, like bring everybody and try to stop this. She was hoping that he would bring all of his Avengers friends, but they're busy apparently, so he brings all the Thunderbolts characters that he had just captured. He also uses his past doing all these terrible things while he was Winter Soldier and trying to make his life better in order to turn them around, to inspire them to do better things with their lives. There's a couple of jokes about this later in the movie because every time someone gets close to the Void and touches it or the Sentry unknowingly uses Void powers on them, they go into their deepest, darkest memories. So when they ask Bucky what he saw, he just tries to play it off like, no, there's nothing terrible in my past. I'm totally fine. I didn't have to look at anything weird. Got one of the biggest laughs in my theater because just everybody remembers all of his scenes in the previous Marvel movies doing all these terrible things, all these traumatic things. Throughout the movie, they sort of hinted at what all the different characters had been doing since the last time we saw them. Some of them, like Ghost, for instance, we hadn't seen in a very long time. So the way they explain it, since the events of Falcon and Winter Soldier, Walker had spiraled and his wife had left him with their child. I'm implying that he's got his redemption arc during the movie and he will eventually get back together with her. Like, things will eventually be okay with their family. Maybe at some point he'll also finally get his shield fixed, because even 14 months later during the post-credit scene, he still hasn't had Bob been able to bend his shield back. But it's not made of vibranium, so he could probably have anybody bend that back. Of all the characters, Ghost probably gets pushed to the side the most. Originally, what they were going to do is explain that she'd been caring for Bill Foster in her free time, who seems like he was supposed to be suffering from cancer, like some degenerative condition, and she was just taking care of him since the events of Ant-Man and the Wasp, and she was using her money that she earned from doing mercenary work for Val for that. Taskmaster probably had her storyline changed the most. The way they explain it, there are like a lot of deleted scenes because they completely changed the movie when the strikes happened. It was right before they were getting ready to shoot the film, and they basically wound up completely redoing the movie before they started filming. So originally, there was a completely different storyline, and one of the biggest changes from the original story to the new story was what they were doing with Taskmaster. Since the events of Black Widow, Avengers Endgame, she'd just been doing regular work for Val as a mercenary, just the way you saw at the beginning of the movie, the way that Black Widow, everybody else had basically been doing. They said the reason why in this final version of the movie that they killed her off so quickly is because they wanted to show some stakes in the movie, like they needed a big death, and they knew they weren't going to be using this character a whole bunch in the future. So they're like, who can we kill that we don't need for Avengers, Doomsday, or Secret Wars, or isn't going to be like a big deal with our movies going forward? In Taskmaster, just fit the bill for that. Personally, I'm not that huge of a fan of that version of the character. Maybe now they can actually turn Tony Masters into a version of Taskmaster in the MCU going forward. They're kind of doing that in the Fantastic Four movie with the female version of Silver Surfer here, the Shala Bal version of Silver Surfer in their universe. I don't think that she's meant to survive the events of that movie with the Fantastic Four. So we will talk about that when we do more Fantastic Four videos. But like obviously there's a lot of Fantastic Four talk happening now because of them showing up in the post-credit scene. I already talked a little bit about Yelena's storyline. Like, she's basically one of the biggest characters in the movie. They spend a lot of time talking about what she's been doing since the events of Black Widow and Avengers Endgame. And we've seen her a couple times already, like during the Hawkeye series. Basically doing a whole lot of cleanup jobs for Val like she does at the beginning of the movie, eating a whole lot of macaroni, murdering a whole lot of people. Red Guardian, as they explain, had just been a limo driver since the events of Avengers Endgame, and he felt so ashamed of what he was doing. Like, he was so dejected, and he'd begun to spiral. That's why he felt like Yelena didn't want to have him around. She gets super pissed that he had basically broken contact with her, like, you haven't called me in over a year, what's going on? They don't really explain what happened to Melina, but David Harbour said that he was actually campaigning Marvel and the director to bring Melina back for the movie. They basically said no, but there's always the chance they could bring her character back in the future. David Harbour said that he was continuing to campaign for her to eventually come back. My assumption is just based on the context is that she went back to Russia and she's just doing more experimental, more research there, trying to help the former Black Widows that they all rescued from the Red Room. And the way they explained Robert Reynolds' backstory is that he came from an abusive household. His father beat his mother, his mother was also very verbally abusive to him, causing him to develop his many psychological conditions, his drug addictions. He was addicted to meth. He was traveling around Southeastern Asia, which is where he got inducted into the Golden Sentry program, the Golden Sentry Serum program. That lab that Yelena blew up at the beginning of the movie was where they actually injected him with the Golden Sentry Serum. In the movie, they also get some documents that Yelena takes where it says the power, that's actually a line directly out of the Sentry comic book about his creation. As is normal for a lot of big Marvel premieres when characters debut, they had the creator of the Sentry in the comics at the big premiere for the movie.
I think every single person has some form of duality within them and some form of challenge.
There are a couple other big characters that they introduced during the movie. Val's OXC leader, like the point man for her at OXC, is Holt, running all of her teams. He's played by Chris Bauer, who most of you probably recognize from True Blood. He's been in a ton of other stuff. There are a bunch of Easter eggs in Val's new Avengers tower, like the whole top of the tower where they go to confront her is meant to be a comp for the original Avengers movie. She kept Tony Stark's bar from the original top of the Avengers tower, but everything else has pretty much been redesigned. She has her own We Have a Hulk moment, but it's a very dark twist on that because Sentry is her Hulk. In the comics, Sentry and Hulk also famously fought each other during the World War Hulk storyline to a standstill. So always lots of questions. Who would win in a fight? World Breaker Hulk or Sentry? Maybe if we're lucky, they'll pay that off at some point during Secret Wars. I know there's a lot of questions about what they're going to do with Sentry during Avengers Doomsday in Secret Wars or even the Void character because they're so OP. How are they going to break the story or how are they going to deal with that? Don't worry, we will talk about that in a second. But you do notice that the detonator in his brain that Mel sets off is not enough to kill him. Like they literally blew apart part of his brain, but it regenerated fast enough for him to survive. Here's the thing though, this is based on the comics, he can still be killed. He was just killed by Null, god of symbiotes. But it takes a lot, like you literally have to like rip him into a couple different pieces. Really good example of this phenomenon is mutants that have healing factors like X-Men characters, Deadpool, Wolverine. In order to perma-kill them, you actually have to destroy their brains because that's where their mutant abilities are centered, like the X gene is centered inside their brains. That is why during Deadpool and Wolverine almost winds up destroying his head with his claws, saying, regenerate from this, because that was basically going to permakill him. But if it wasn't clear, Sentry is not meant to be a mutant. He was given his powers through a serum, so he's a mutate, like his body was mutated into this state, kind of like Spider-Man or the Hulk. I am sure there are going to be a lot of questions about what Spider-Man was doing when the Void was covering New York City. What was Mayor Kingpin doing? What was Daredevil doing? Because this was all happening concurrently with the events of Daredevil Season 1 and Daredevil Season 2. We will talk about that later in the video too. They only do some of the Sentry's powers during this movie, but the way they explain it is that he basically has any power that he believes that he has. Val kind of has a line where she says, you can do anything. That's what that's a reference to, because in the comics, his list of powers is so long. He basically has every single possible type of power you could have in the comics. A lot of the time, though, it just depends on which writer is writing the character or how they want to use the character as to what types of powers he uses. During this movie, he displays super strength, he can fly, he has telekinesis, he can teleport, he has super speed, heat generation, like he can increase the temperature of things even without touching them physically. In the Void, separately, like separate personalities, kind of like Legion, where different personalities have different types of powers. Void also has S-tier psychic powers and can consume reality with his Void domain, inside which he has god-level control over every aspect of reality on the level of Scarlet Witch inside the Hex, like fine levels of molecular control, and he can create anything.
Intentionally expanding the borders of the false world we created.
For those of you asking, though, that does not make him more powerful than beings like Galactus or the Celestials. He could probably fight them for a little while, but like if Null is able to kill him, and Null has trouble against the like if the Celestials give him pause, but he can barely kill the Celestials, then Sentry, for example, probably can't completely solo the Celestials, or if he were to fight them, he would last for a long time, but ultimately probably wouldn't be able to permakill them. But he doesn't even come close to hitting his top level of strength during this movie because he doesn't fully understand how his powers work, so he isn't pushing himself hard enough. A big part of his abilities is that he has to understand what he's trying to do, like he has to understand his powers in order to be able to use different ones. So this is them just sort of dipping their toe in the character, and they'll just continue to develop him as they continue to bring him back in future movies through Secret Wars. We will see what Marvel's long-term plan is for the character after Secret Wars, though, just because he is so powerful. At a certain point, you have power creep problems, like it becomes a Dragon Ball problem, where you have to find ways to reset the character back to baseline. That's what they're using his psychological conditions for. Like right now, at the end of this movie, he basically hides from his own powers, like he's afraid to actually use his powers, which is how they explain him not just running around solving every single problem all over the place. This is also probably how they're going to deal with him during Avengers Doomsday. Like Doctor Doom, how does he stop someone like Sentry who's so powerful? Well, he attacks him in more psychological ways. It's also something they get into on The Boys TV show with Homelander, who was also created using a special serum. Most of Homelander's greatest weaknesses are all psychological weaknesses, not physical weaknesses. During the movie, they do explain that his suit that he's wearing here, it'll probably change over future movies eventually, but it's not nanotechnology, it's like a real physical suit that he climbs into every time he puts it on. Throughout the movie, though, his void powers throw people into their darkest memories, and later, at the end of the movie, they travel into the actual void space to deal with all these things and try to save Bob. Inside the void, the flashbacks Yelena keeps seeing her first major test in the Red Room, and later regular types of tests that they put them through. The other girl they required her to name have killed to keep from forming too many attachments to anyone, to make them better killers. It's implied that she was a friend that she had when she was early in the Red Room. That later test where they whipped the hands of the losers of that speed test was basically just to motivate them to be able to put guns together faster. Then she sees her recent past getting drunk and passing out between missions in a pile of flesh in her bathroom here. Total alcoholic, rock bottom, which she'd mentioned that she'd been doing recently between missions for Val. Then she sees Bob in the attic of his childhood home, tinkering with video receivers and tech. Maybe he has some secret tech skills, because it looks like he's working on a lot of receivers here. Remembering his abusive father who beat his mother and his abusive mother who was also being beaten by his father. Generally very, very bad home life, causing him to develop these psychological conditions. They also explain that the chicken that he fights later was himself, like he was in the chicken suit high on meth while he was doing this, and that's why he was attacking them. The younger chicken version of Bob was the one that was attacking them. Later, when he confronts his void self, like Bob versus the void in this lab, it's meant to be the lab that Yelena blew up at the beginning of the movie, where they experimented on him, gave him the golden Sentry serum. You notice there are these two voided figures behind him on the walls. It's implied that he did that to them after he first got the golden Sentry serum and just blacked out and forgot that he did that at some point. I've already done a much longer video for the actual ending of the movie in the post-credit scenes, but part of the idea is that Bob is able to talk down the void, like he's basically able to absorb the void back into himself and retake control of his body with the help of the other Thunderbolts characters. Like, part of the idea is that he doesn't beat the crap out of the void, he accepts his darker self, like it's all about acceptance. So it's kind of like he reabsorbs the void into himself, and it's no longer a separate personality, it's just like part of himself. New York City goes back to normal. Red Guardian swears he's going to kill Val because she has the most punchable face ever, and in order to save herself from going to the raft, going to prison, she basically turns on a dime using the press conference to name them as the New Avengers, claiming that she did all these things to save the day, basically trying to claim credit for everything good that happened, but also she caused all these problems herself.
We need each other.
All the Thunderbolts characters go along with it, but on the condition that they now have dirt on Val that could send her to prison, so Yelena says, "We own you now." There's a montage of credits of newspaper headlines of their New Avengers team in the ensuing months, and most of them are actually ripped from real life. Like, a lot of them are just jokes that people told about Sam Wilson's New Avengers when they heard that he was going to be putting a New Avengers team together, like Not My Avengers or the B-Vengers. In the way that Walker explains it later during the post-credit scene is that everybody inside the MCU, like regular people, are posting very, very nasty memes about their New Avengers team, and inside the MCU, they support Sam Wilson's New Avengers over their New Avengers team. During the montage of all the newspaper clippings of their New Avengers team, meant to be mostly parodies of real-world photos, they actually transition to the Thunderbolts title, which morphs into the New Avengers title, confirming what everybody thought, like the team was going to turn into the New Avengers, and the asterisk was meant to denote the temporary nature of the Thunderbolts name. I'll post a link to my post-credit scene video, but essentially during the post-credit scene, it picks up 14 months later. Val's finished the New Avengers facility. Avengers with an A, like there's a new Avengers symbol here. It looks like this. It's meant to look a little bit more like the New Avengers symbol in the comics too. The whole vibe of the team is meant to be a little bit more like Norman Osborn's New Avengers during the Dark Reign era in the comics, where Norman Osborn replaced the Avengers with a bunch of villains and anti-heroes who would do whatever he told them to do. While the post-credit scene is going on, Bucky also says that Sam Wilson is filing a trademark for the Avengers name, and what are they going to do if there's two different Avengers teams? Who's the world going to support? They will likely resolve that during Avengers Doomsday, where a bunch of them either die off, go off to other teams, and then some of them just combine into a single New Avengers team. We know that Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom will eventually become a version of God Emperor Doom. We're heading into Secret Wars, so most of the characters in Avengers Doomsday will probably either die off or barely, a couple of them make it to Battleworld in Avengers Secret Wars. They reference the space crisis, which is all about the incursions, so like the incursions have gotten worse 14 months later. Then they spot the Fantastic Four spaceship coming from another universe into Earth, like it's coming to New York City in the MCU. So they're implying that right after this, the Thunderbolts are going to meet the Fantastic Four. Like, who are you people? I've already talked about this during my post-credit scene video, but there might be a corresponding scene at the end of the Fantastic Four movie that sort of syncs up with this scene of them coming to the MCU where they meet the Thunderbolts characters. Interesting detail though, the director, Jake Schreier, said that he didn't direct the actual post-credit scene, which is actually normal for Marvel movies. Usually post-credit scenes are filmed on the sets of other movies by whichever director or multiple directors are filming that new movie. So the way that he explained it is that this post-credit scene was filmed on the set for Avengers Doomsday, so it's probably the Russos that actually filmed it, and that's probably why Florence Pugh was confused about when they started actually filming Avengers Doomsday. Kevin Feige in an interview had to correct her, saying that, no, we haven't begun principal photography yet, like a couple of weeks ago when she was doing an interview. When he said she was confused and they were working on pre-production in the scene that they had been filming at the time, he was probably talking about them filming this post-credit scene. So part of the idea is that this post-credit scene is basically meant to be the very beginning of Avengers Doomsday. Sort of like the Hulk crashing into the Sanctum Sanctorum to warn Doctor Strange about Thanos. I'll probably do a different video about the alternate storyline that they were going to do before the strikes, before they completely changed the movie, Taskmaster's original storyline, what they were going to do when the movie was supposed to end Marvel Phase 5 and lead into Avengers Kang Dynasty. Remember, there was like an original version of this movie that was meant to set up Avengers Kang Dynasty before they'd pivoted to Robert Downey Jr. Doctor Doom. There are a lot of big questions, too, just about the changes they made in general. For instance, Baron Zemo created the Thunderbolts in the comics. What was Baron Zemo doing during the events of this movie? Is he still on the raft? Why didn't they include him in the movie in any way? What about Spider-Man, Daredevil, Kingpin? What were they all doing in New York City while everything was going crazy? My assumption is that Spider-Man was stuck in a loop, experiencing all the worst things that had ever happened to him, just like all the other characters. Like, they were experiencing their worst memories, so he was probably reliving Aunt May dying at the hands of Norman Osborn's Green Goblin during Spider-Man No Way Home. Would not be surprised if his Spidey sense also helped him break through what was happening in the Void into other people's rooms too, and he was just trying to help people on his own. The way they explain his Spidey sense in previous movies is that it helps him break through a lot of illusions and things like this. Daredevil's abilities aren't quite as strong as Spider-Man's, but his abilities have also helped him do similar things like that too, like break through and realize what's real and what's fake. But I wouldn't be surprised if Kingpin tries to use this as ammo during the events of Daredevil Born Again Season 2. They usually lightly reference stuff. That's supposed to release in March next year before Avengers Doomsday, so I just would not be surprised if there's some light references to something crazy happening with a superpowered being up towards the Avengers Tower. There were a lot of light references like that during Daredevil Born Again Season 1, where like they referenced Spider-Man but in a roundabout kind of way. For those of you asking, how is Doctor Doom going to stop Sentry or the Void during Avengers Doomsday? Like I said, probably in some psychological way. Because he's Doctor Doom, he will control both magic and technology on the level of, say, like Doctor Strange. Like, he'd go toe-to-toe with Doctor Strange, but also toe-to-toe with Iron Man, which is why Doctor Doom is such a versatile character. But because it's Robert Downey Jr., you also have to imagine that he's going to be messing with people's heads, making them think that he is the returned 616 Tony Stark. So he's just going to be messing with the MCU characters in really big ways to accomplish his goals. And it sounds like it'd be pretty easy for him to mess with the Sentry's head so that the Sentry is essentially disabled. All you gotta do to stop the Sentry is just mess with his head enough. There's a lot of stuff going on during the movie. I've tried to cover all the really big Easter eggs and references, and my post-credit scene video contains a whole lot more, so I'll link that at the end of this. But if there's any other Easter eggs or references that you spotted that I haven't talked about in my previous videos, just write them below in the comments. Really hoping for some cool Sentry fights during Secret Wars and Doomsday though, like Sentry versus Thor or Sentry versus Hulk. That would be amazing. There are a couple other videos that I'm working on, like the deleted scenes, alternate endings, alternate storylines. I'll try to post that soon. We also just found out that Jeremy Renner basically turned down Hawkeye Season 2 because Marvel tried to cheap out on him. I'll probably do a video for that at some point this weekend too. Big WTF. We'll also probably get a brand new Fantastic Four trailer really soon. We're also supposed to get an official Superman trailer in the next couple of weeks too. So there's like a lot of really big stuff happening. This summer will be like the battle of the box office. We will see which comic book related movie winds up earning the most money. Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four, or Superman, really like the big matchup. But you also have Jurassic World Rebirth. That's not really a comic book movie, but it's also coming out around the same time this summer that Fantastic Four and Superman are coming out. So there's just a lot of really big stuff coming out this year. We will see if any of the movies wind up earning over $1 billion. Everybody click here for my post-credit scene video, and everybody click here for my brand new Avengers Doomsday video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.